Welcome back to the second part of the summer breakdown. If you haven't yet listened to part one, you should go back and listen to part one, where we talk about how Linus and Ike ended up leaving my workshop early on a Sunday morning, headed north in a 100-year-old car and on an 80-year-old motorcycle. And if we'll ever see them alive again, you'll find out if they died during this episode. So you don't want to spoil the first part. We'll want to see, did in fact they die? Did they make it out alive? Who knows?
Are these just actors reading our parts?
Yeah, it's true. It's amazing sound-alikes that we were able to find.
We recorded it before we left. I thought we established that.
That's exactly right. That's exactly. So welcome again, Linus, our good friend to the podcast. Ike, thanks for this, whatever this is, as always. And hopefully we haven't lost our entire audience during the first summer breakdown. But trust me, fair listener, back to regularly scheduled Underpowered Hour Land Rover programming next week. But because of the summer breakdown, Ike and I, and Linus, were able to take a week off and enjoy, greasing Linus's bushings or something. At any rate, so when we last left our heroes, they were pulling out of the driveway at my workshop, and Ike nearly crashed trying to get into gear, going around the corner, and you're off. So you're headed down away from my shop towards
the unknown.
Towards adventure.
Sunrise.
Just down.
So one of the major concerns that we had during this whole prep for this trip was that we were going to be dying of heat.
Right.
Heat exhaustion.
Right.
So we were hoping to leave very early, and we were hoping to get to the coast very quickly. But it turned out to be absolutely not a problem anywhere along the way. So I think you're right on 126.
Yeah, that's right.
And
right
so
on
we jumped on the 126. It was 5:30 in the morning, and it was cold, which we were not expecting.
It was cold
at all.
But Linus was driving his car, and he's wearing a motorcycle helmet. Which is...
I have no windshield, just for those of you who don't know.
Also, he has a soft plate in his head from when he was a kid.
It's true.
It's true. Very sad. Very sad. Hopefully you've been able to look at our Instagram over the last week to see some of the... Our Instagram was described to me by a listener the other day as the CD-ROM that comes as a companion with the book. So I think that's very apropos, as I think it was when I posted, coincidentally, the photo of the lube chisel, which I happen to have and have been playing with all afternoon.
Don't show
as
that
we've
to
been
people.
recording this.
Nobody needs
to see
I've just got some crevices that need to be lubed, so I have it here with me. But yes, so hopefully people have seen the Model T Roadster. If not, head to our Instagram at Underpowered Hour and check it out, and seen the Buffalo Seat motorcycle that Ike is currently, that the crabs are migrating out of into Ike's motorcycle suit as we speak.
I think they're well established at this point.
There's a pretty substantial colony.
I'm feeling good. This is where we've left the warehouse. I'm feeling a little bit more comfortable on the motorcycle. I survived, Los Angeles traffic, and then we're on the highway, and it's 5:00 on a Sunday. There's not a lot of traffic, and we're cruising along. We're watching the sunrise. It's a little cool, and it's just everything's coming together, and I'm feeling really, really good about this trip. And later we would find out that was
a misplaced optimism.
Yeah.
So you head down the 126. You're going through Fillmore and some of those little farming communities on the way out to the coast, and you eventually end up on the PCH. Are you taking the PCH north?
We had talked about taking a little highway out of, I think, Santa Paula.
Mm-hmm.
I can't think of what it is at the moment. 158 or
something like that. Yeah.
It comes up through the mountains and then sort of rejoins Highway 1 further up. But being as that it was so early on the trip and we weren't so familiar with the motorcycle, we decided not to do it. And I think it would have been fine, but we were motoring along. It's a surprisingly good match, that car and that motorcycle, as far as comfortable cruising speed. The car has an overhead valve conversion, and it has a Ruckstuhl 2-speed rear end, and it has Hauck wire wheels, and it really gets down the highway. I think comfortably going about 62. And 57 to 62, and that I think is right about
hydroxylator.
Forney hydroxylators. It was working very well that day. But we were just having a great time. I mean, it turned out to be a good match of the two machines going, and I don't know if anything could have been better than that morning, really.
It was really great. And, the motorcycle is, you don't want to like cruise it at really high rates of speed because of the gearing, but it's powerful. It's 1200 cc's. And this was the first year of a larger engine and higher compression. And so it feels like it's really capable of quite high speeds, 100 plus miles an hour maybe. But the braking and shifting and all of the other systems that support that engine and those speeds are incredibly primitive and terrible.
Right. To describe it mildly.
Yeah, it has a front brake, but it really doesn't do much.
I think that machine wants to kill you. That is its goal.
I think it wants to kill everyone. It's just it's enraged that it's been forced to live this long. It's just it wants to die, and it wants to take you with it.
That's right. The spirit of that buffalo has inhabited the motorcycle.
It's cursed.
It's cursed. It is.
Yeah, that motorcycle was assembled on an Indian burial ground or something like that. It's bad.
So what I think we didn't have much interesting story to tell about the morning. I think we started
because everything was going well. We were lulled into a false sense of security.
We were going up Highway 1, motoring along. The motorcycle was doing well. I think we would stopped a few times, I think, to look at the coast, at the ocean, and we were kind of coming up towards Santa Barbara, the Pismo area, kind of. I think we made a few. We came off of the main highway as much as we could because being on the highway is boring. So we were going through some small towns right down on the coast and being on Highway 1. I think sort of in the mid-morning we started having some kind of sputterings and poppings going on with the motorcycle.
Yeah, the motorcycle was running along and you'd feel like, oh, I can pass this car, I can speed up, I got plenty of power. And then every once in a while you'd be like going down a hill and it would like lose steam, or you would, you'd be cruising and then you'd pick up the pace a little bit and it would cough and sputter and then take off. And so we were like, all right, something's happening. There's a ignition problem, a dirty plug, a foul jet, something. And so we've got to stop and we've got to look at it. And, before that happens, we were driving through a small town and I'm in the left-hand lane and they're doing some road construction. And so the road is going from 2 lanes to 1 lane, and there's 2 sections of road with a gap about 4 inches wide in between the 2 sections of road. And so I'm having to negotiate this, and I have to shift. I have to downshift from 3rd to 2nd, I believe. I'm going about 45 miles an hour, and I take my hands off the handlebar as the lane is going from 2 lanes to 1 lane, and that gap in the road catches the front tire and rips the handlebars out of my hands, and I go down and I'm sliding along the pavement, and my new antique motorcycle is showering sparks, and the traffic is stopping, and my clothes and my body is grating against the ground, and I look down and my I'm like, my elbow pad is grating along the highway, and I'm like, man, sure hopes that holds up, and I'm like, oh, that's probably the end of this trip, and I hope I don't get run over, and like all these things are going through my head as this is happening,
and I'm in front of him. I have no idea this is going on.
He's gone. He continues driving.
I'll tell you the reason that because I have no rear view mirrors on the car, and the reason that I knew something had happened is by chance there was another man in front of me on a modern Harley Davidson,
Mm-hmm.
and he had seen Ike go down in his rear view mirror, and he pulled off to look back, and I saw him looking, shockingly back behind me at something. And that's when I looked back and saw Ike tumbling down the road with cars going around him.
Yeah.
So
this all happens, and I'm like, okay, I'm trying to remain calm, like everything sort of grinds literally to a halt, and I'm assessing myself to see if I'm injured badly or something,
Mm-hmm.
and then I'm like, oh, better turn off the ignition and the fuel and all the things that might cause a fire. So I run up and I turn all that off, and people are getting out of their cars to see if I'm okay. And fortunately, no one runs over me, and everything's fine. And we pick up the motorcycle and we push it to the side of the road. And, I'm like trying to see if my elbows like ground through, and, making sure my helmet's not cracked, or, all these things that you're like, oh, like people get into accidents and they don't realize that they're injured or whatever until afterwards.
A couple of helpful bystanders did contract tetanus from the motorcycle. But other than that,
they also walked away with a serious case of crabs. But
I think I got back to you right about the time that the motorcycle had been pushed by those helpful people to the side. But
they were just putting their hands on the motorcycle, and that's how they got the crabs. I actually did most of the pushing.
Okay. I had to get the Model T up on the curb and get out of it, and the whole time, the only thing that has yet happened is that Ike is rolling around on the ground still, and he's not stood up yet, and the bike hasn't been moved. And I'm just imagining, bones sticking out and like teeth
compound
missing.
Fractures. And getting out of the Model T, if you've seen the Olympic pommel horse,
has no
event,
doors.
It's very similar to the pommel horse, where Linus does a full leg sweep all the way around the vehicle twice, and then a backwards dismount. It's pretty impressive.
Or Gymkata, if you've ever seen that.
Gymkata. Oh, no.
Same, yeah.
So I had all of these horrible visions in my head of what I was going to find when I got back there. But when I saw the bike come up and the people helping him push, I was pretty confident that there would only be some minor stitches or, some sprains. But it turned out there was very little damage to either the man or the bike. So we got very lucky.
There wasn't a whole lot of, damage to either. There was a few scrapes on the motorcycle, little scuff on the fender, little scrape on the crash bar, little, just, kind of a few things, but no real serious things that we could ascertain. The floorboard was a little tweaked, like just a couple things, but not so bad that I was like, oh, this is a trip ending problem, unless we find out later that, maybe
something cracked.
Yeah, maybe something cracked, maybe, or like there's little things propagating under
in a film. We would cut to the close up of something where a tiny little crack would start.
Yeah.
Just after everybody said, "No, I think it's going to be fine. I think we should be just fine," and that's when you see the pavement start to crack and the lava ooze out before we cut to the next scene.
Yeah, unbeknownst to us, the lava was forming in a pressurized bubble underneath the motorcycle, and later
the Dante's Peak of motorcycle trips.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly right. And what Tommy Lee Jones is about to show up at any moment
and see that old couple boiled to death.
But remember the snorkel on his truck going across the lake, and then there's a other guy, and he's like, "That guy doesn't have a snorkel on his truck. He'll never make it." And you're like, "It's not, whatever."
It's not a thing.
Anyways, but so that's what. Are we up to like now the 5th time you should have died on this trip? I think it's something
probably,
like that. If we're counting Indian
least.
food, I think it's something like maybe 5th, maybe 6th. Time
and certainly about the 100th time his leg should have broken from kicking the motorcycle.
So we get the motorcycle going again, and we were like ascertaining all of the superficial damage that we've incurred, and the motorcycle is obviously still. I don't think it had stumbled at this point. We had stopped and fixed the ignition problem. Slightly before this, we had replaced the coil, the gap on the points was closing.
The point gap was closed.
Yeah. We pulled the little cap off of the timer, I think it's called, instead of the distributor, and we had noticed that the gap had fully closed, and there was no spark, and so we fixed that, and it seemed to be better, and so we were riding high until this problem happened, and then we were. It's definitely discouraging. This is day 1, 2 if you count the pickup of the motorcycle, and already we've had some pretty significant problems. And I'm like, is this really a good idea? Am I gonna really hurt myself doing this? Is this motorcycle cut out for this? Am I cut out for? You start to have some doubts about whether this is a good idea or not. But everything's okay, and so nothing too bad happened. So I was like, I'm gonna get back on this horse and ride it. So we decided we would carry on. We would try to make it to a place that Linus likes to camp, called Plasket Creek. And so we got on the motorcycle and we started riding, and things were great. Things were good again. It lulled us into a false sense of security. We thought the worst was over.
I can't really remember how many times that thing wanted to stall on you. When you'd slow down.
Well, it was because of the points gap. It was doing that. And then, once we fixed that, it stopped doing that.
But it had other problems.
I'm sure it had other problems, and probably still does.
Let's see. We got after the time we stopped to work on it under those eucalyptus trees before we crashed it. Or after?
I think that was just before the blood started leaking out of
started coming
the gauges.
As soon as the gauges start
squealing,
yeah, exactly. Yeah, it only speaks in tongues for like an hour, right near the end of the day, and it's fine. Other than that,
yeah.
It started when one of the handlebars turned into a leg bone, and then. So we did have a pretty good long repair time on that motorcycle that day.
We did, and this guy stopped, and he pulled over, and he was riding like a newer KTM touring motorcycle, and he gets off, and he's like, "Are you riding this someplace?"
He had just done a 2-day long trip on his bike, and he was absolutely beat.
Yeah, he was like,
going home.
I'm so tired from riding this brand new motorcycle 2 days on this really good. And he looks at our trip, or our motorcycle, and he asks us about our trip, and he's like, I can't believe you guys are doing this. He's like, I am a complete pussy. His
hair turned white. He sold the motorcycle and just walked away.
Like,
it was weird. Yeah, it's weird.
If you look directly into the headlights, you got to be really careful. It'll you try to commit suicide. You just can't. You can't look it in the eye. So at any rate, he was very impressed with our trip, and at that point, we knew we were done for embarking on this trip, because here's a guy who's a experienced seasoned motorcyclist, another one might I add, who's telling us that maybe this is foolhardy,
bringing the total list of people who said this was not a good idea to everyone.
At least a dozen. Everyone we talked to.
We didn't even think it was a good idea.
Literally no one thought it was a good idea.
And meanwhile, Linus's car is having no problems.
It was perfect.
It's perfect. It's not having any difficulties, and we're like, oh man, this motorcycle is never going to make it.
We were going through many ups and downs of of emotions over that thing, sputterings and stallings, and it would shut off when he would come to a stop sign or a stoplight, and he'd have to push it over, and then we'd have to try and get it started again.
And on a hill, and like in traffic, and like
you were going down a hill, and it turned off.
So many people flipped us off, and like it was pretty bad. But we get to Plaskett Creek, and I'm like so excited because we've actually hit one of our goals. And we get off the motorcycle or fall off the motorcycle because I'm pretty sore, I'm like really sore.
He was walking around like this.
Riding the motor. Yeah, I looked like Frankenstein. I couldn't bend my legs. My arms were stuck out, like there's this beautiful overlook at the ocean and it's like a 5-minute walk away from the campsite there. And I don't even want to go over there. I'm so sore. And I can't even. I'm like, I gotta lay down for a minute. I'm so sore. I'm like in a stress position, and I really was stressed the entire time. I was just like, grabbing the motorcycle, holding on very tightly, and I'm really tense. And I get off the motorcycle. I'm extremely sore. And I can barely walk, and I'm we're camping we're camping this whole time. We didn't even talk about the fact that we were camping this entire time. Right. Every night we are planning to camp on the ground, and so we've got all this camping gear and all this stuff with us.
And so getting to Plaskett was a goal, but we didn't know what was going to happen. It's a pretty popular place. It's on the Big Sur coastline. It's very touristy.
In the summer,
And it's summer, and getting a campsite is like impossible.
Very difficult.
And it's probably easy to sort of do a bootleg camp on a motorcycle somewhere along that area, but in a car, which I was in, it's hard. So I was nervous that we weren't going to be able to get a spot there, and so we pulled in, and the place looks pretty full. And I went up to the place, and I don't know if people are more interested in trying to help us when they see what we're driving, or less interested in trying to help us.
We're just like, let's just move along. Move along.
But surprisingly, when I said, "Do you have any places?" they said, "No,
absolutely not. The place is entirely full.
No places to rent." But there is one lady who had reserved several campsites, and one of the people in her party isn't coming tonight. And if you go ask her, you might be able to buy that site from her. Her name was Hope, and I went over there in the Model T.
Allegedly.
I told her, allegedly. And I said, here's us. What have you got? And she accepted my money, and we bought the site from her for that night. It was the only way to get a site.
It was probably the only campsite within 30 miles. Either direction.
Very likely. And so another wonderful serendipitous stroke of luck for us to have.
You settled in for a comfortable night.
We started
immediately.
We started
working on the motorcycle
and all this stuff. And
what were we doing? We were still having a heck of a time with something on it.
I don't remember, but it was something that, yes, we were working on the motorcycle. We were like, oh, something doesn't work.
We had all these pieces off of it. And was this when we started had we replaced the coil and all that by then? I think we did that the next day when we were stuck in that sort of tree cutting traffic section.
Oh, right? Yeah.
I think we did that the next day. So we were down there cleaning the points and filing them and trying to make it stop sputtering and cleaning the spark plugs and wondering what the heck was going on and messing around.
And this lady pulls up in a Suburban.
This lady pulls up with like 9,000 children inside.
There's like a whole baseball team worth of kids in the back of this thing.
You're in my campsite.
And she's Australian. And she's like, what the bloody hell are you doing in my camp spot?
She was nice about it. I was like, I bought this from Hope. And she goes, what? But that's supposed to be our site. So it turned out that wasn't true. She ended up going back and discussing with Hope, and she had a different spot that she was going to be in that Hope had reserved. So we were able to stay there, fortunately. And surprisingly, the site that she got to go to was way better than ours.
Oh, all right. Well, at least you got a place to stay.
We did.
And that was day one?
No,
That's still day one?
It's still day one, and
Wow.
and the curse continues, because after this all happens, we're sitting there and we're like, I think we're playing cards, and the coastal highway is nearby, and there's not a lot of traffic, but
it was pretty late at night by then, too. It was very dark.
Yeah, as we're playing cards by lantern light, we hear this. And there's like a huge accident out on the highway, and we just, Linus gets up and runs, and I
away.
I
into a tree.
I jump up and then realize that everything hurts and fall over into a crumpled heap. And he runs over to check and make sure everything's okay. And I kind of like teeter along for another 10 minutes. And these poor people, one of them stopped for some reason on the highway to turn into a camp spot or something. And another person just plowed into the back of him. And there's parts of cars all over. And there's people outside. And there's a little bit of acrimony about whose fault it is and all of this sort of thing.
Fortunately, nobody was hurt at all. And they did have enough service to call 911, which they did. And it was fine. But what a thing to have happen, right?
What a wonderful way to end.
You're all done.
I was just thinking how fortunate I was not to be rear-ended on the motorcycle in, basically doing the same thing, turning
or
into that
off the
campsite.
motorcycle for that matter.
Or off the motorcycle, yeah.
Just be run over straight away.
So
I have to keep moving my microphone and chair forward because the sun is
beating down on your head.
I'm
very
now
specific
right
fan.
up against the table, so I'll get another 5 minutes, and then I'm going to have to put a paper plate up there or something.
So day 2, a beautiful
Day 2.
sleep at Hope's campsite, right next to the car accident, the flaming wreckage of the car accident from the night before. You wake up, birds are chirping. I imagine is basically paralyzed at this point after sleeping
paralyzed
on the ground all night.
The sleeping really helped, and that was good. But I did wake up, and I was just incredibly sore and stiff. And so we start for the day, and we seem like we're over the hump. We start going, and we get to a construction zone where
even before that, you pulled over because you didn't know where your wallet was.
Oh, well.
Remember that?
That did happen. Something else happened, like it was sputtering and...
Yeah, so you pulled over and then
realized
we were
that Hope had stolen your wallet.
Hope had stolen my wallet, and it
we
was back
couldn't
at the
find your
campsite.
wallet, and so you sent me back to the campsite to look for the wallet.
And I was tinkering with the motorcycle.
Basically, the entire time I was gone, you couldn't get it to start.
That's right. I kicked the motorcycle at least 1,000 times, going through that whole ritual and then like letting it sit in between. And then
Burning a little bit of sage.
Round about the time Linus comes back to tell me he hasn't found my motorcycle, it starts.
The wallet.
Yeah. And so we get back on the motorcycle and we get in the car and we start going and things are actually going pretty smoothly. Until we get to this place where they're like
trimming trees. They have one lane closed.
Yeah. It's like in the construction site where they have like a flagger that's telling you that one lane of traffic can go or come. And so we get in there and the motorcycle starts to act up, and we spend probably an hour and a half, 2 hours working on the motorcycle at finding that the coil terminals have corroded. Like whether through storage or whatever, and the wires that are going down into the coil are corroded. So we replace the coil, and then the wires, Linus finds that they aren't fully seating into the coil. And so we get that resolved, and we start motoring, and we're going along really good. We're making time. We're doing really well. We're going
finally over the hump.
Yeah, we're going like 60, 65 miles an hour. Linus's car, I'm like really impressed because before we left, Linus was like, I'm going to be going 45. And he's going, 65. We're cruising down the highway. This is great. Everything's going
and now
great.
We're coming up through Monterey. We're getting into the section between Monterey and Santa Cruz.
Laughing, high-fiving each other.
We're probably, about 10 miles south of Santa Cruz, and I start notice my oil pressure gauge is fluctuating between 5 and 20, just back and forth, slowly back and forth. And I'm thinking, I have a pickup screen down in the oil pan that is like a coarse filter to pick up the material that is ground off of the low speed band from when you're taking off from a stop, and any other band material that wears away, but primarily it comes off of there. And I'm thinking in my head, this is probably starting to clog again, even though I cleaned it before we left. And so I'm watching that, and it's not going to zero. So I know there's oil there. And so we get into Santa Cruz, and we come up to a stoplight as you're getting through onto Mission Street to continue out northbound. And I start getting water spraying on me. And I realize that the temperature gauge on the motometer way out in front of me is all the way at the top.
So Linus, I'm in front and I'm motoring along and I'm thinking everything is just great. And Linus just cruises past me, to get my attention, and then pulls off the highway. And I'm like, uh-oh, what's going on? Is he having an IBS moment, or what's happening? And fortunately, or unfortunately, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, we pulled over, and like the most beautiful place you could ever find is this nice green lawn in front of this old Victorian house up on the hill leading to UCSC.
Under a shady tree.
Under a shady tree. And so I get out and I say, I'm out of water, So I start pouring water into the radiator, and it starts coming out of the valve cover. Oh, no. And so I don't know what happened at this point, but the water had gotten into the oil, and there was no more water in the engine, and it was coming out. And so
there was a lot of water in the engine. It just wasn't where it's supposed to be.
Yeah. So I assume it's a blown head gasket at this point. And so I have a number of friends in Santa Cruz, so I start calling around looking for, what I have on that car is a roof overhead valve conversion. And so it doesn't use a standard Model T head gasket. It uses a different one with a different number of valves because it's got overheads instead. So I start calling around saying, where can I find a head gasket for this? And I think the Rajo 8 valve uses the same head gasket as the roof does, but nobody's got one. Got one. So
there's no 100-year-old head gaskets in Santa Cruz.
No. Right. So we basically, unfortunately, at this point, decide that unless we want to wait several days for a head gasket to come in the mail, and then do such a repair, that we have to either abandon the car or abandon the motorcycle and the car and go home, or we have to just commit suicide and walk into the ocean, never to be seen again.
So we're sitting on these.
We're sitting there,
this lawn, and we've got all our shit strewn out, and like Linus has got the hood open on the car, and he's like laying in the street, and we're all covered in grease, and there's garbage everywhere, and we look like we've just moved into this like nice neighborhood, and we're complete hobos. We're just bearded, dirty, homeless people. And this nice neighbor comes up, and initially he's like, "What are you doing here?" And then we explain everything, and he's like, "What are you idiots doing here?" But he was very nice, and he
brought us some water and Very nice man.
He was like worked at the local historical society, and he was like, "You guys appreciate history clearly."
Okay, I have to do something about this sun. So you keep talking. I think that's right about when Tessa drove by.
Yeah, so we're sitting there and we're talking to this neighbor fellow, and Tessa, Linus's friend from like 10 years ago, drives by and waves and clearly recognizes us, and also realizes that we're idiots. But she just drives by and doesn't say anything. And she doesn't stop. She just waves and drives on as if that's a normal occurrence, and that'll be important later. But Linus finds his friend Todd, who worked with amusement. He worked in the amusement industry, like making
like a carny?
Yeah, like a carny.
No. Like manufacturing amusement park rides.
Oh,
Yeah.
I see.
Yeah,
And
he's
so
a machinist and
very
a
interesting
very talented guy.
and a car collector, has a bunch of really interesting small cars, and old cars are his thing. And he comes with a trailer and rescues the car, and I ride the motorcycle over to Todd's house, and we look at his old cars, and we have his wife yells at us for leaving cars at her house and dripping oil on her driveway, but she's very nice about it. She yells at us in the nicest possible way. And
Todd has a wonderful collection of cars. He has 3 Messerschmitts. He has a Zip cycle car. He has his own Model T Speedster that he built in high school. He has an 11 Maxwell, an 06 Cadillac, a 23 Willys Knight.
Nice.
And an Isetta and an Austin 7.
They're all stored in a garage that is about 10 by 7.
But they're all stacked up in there.
Yeah, it's amazing. He's like, oh, there's a car over there. There's a car over there. Oh, wait, you're standing on a car, and there's a car above you.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. And he has a 29 Lincoln as well, a nice sedan that he keeps at his parents'. That was not there. So, so during this time, I have texted Tessa to say, hi, that was us on the side of the road.
Thanks for driving by.
And she says, what do you need anything? And I'm thinking, oh, well, I don't really know. By chance, I have a modern car that is parked in a driveway about 40 miles away from where we were. And I'm thinking, okay, where are we going to stay tonight? Do I need to take Ike somewhere? Is he going to leave? Am I going to stay here? What's going to happen? And Tessa says, if you need to borrow a car, just, let me know. And I said, okay, well, let's borrow Tessa's car and we'll go get my truck, and then we'll be able to do something, whatever it is. And so Tessa drives to Todd's house. I don't know what on earth Tessa could possibly care about us so much, but she saved us in so many ways. I don't know how we'll ever thank her. But she shows up in her car and says, this is the car you can drive. It has 700 miles on it.
Whoa.
It's brand new. She just bought it, and she's letting me drive it.
You've gone from the oldest car in the world to potentially the newest car in the world inside of about 8 hours.
In a very short time. Yeah. So we borrow Tessa's car, drive to get my pickup truck, and Tessa says, why don't you stay with me at my house as well as borrowing my car, because I have an extra room and an extra couch, and you can stay here. So we pick up my pickup truck. We leave my Model T at Todd's and Ike's motorcycle at Todd's, and we go get my truck and we go back to Tessa's house. And I think we left the motorcycle at Todd's.
We did. Yes, we put a tarp over it, and we left it there for the evening. And we went to Tessa's house, and she's like the nicest lady ever. She's like, oh, you look like you need some aromatherapy. And I'm like, that's actually the least of my problems. But thank you for noticing.
Do you know a chiropractor or maybe
she gave you like three
surgeon?
different self-exercising like roller things to try to straighten you back out from your hunched over discomforted
she's
position
like,
you were stuck in.
I happen to have a depretzelator right behind here in my closet. You should try it out. And sure enough, she's got an electric depretzelator, and she's
stretched him right back out.
Yeah, she's like, put this behind your neck. Actually, really helped. She's like,
it really did.
Yeah. So this was actually really good. So we, except for the part where Linus's car blew up, this was a wonderful stop because it was relaxing, and
we got to see Todd.
We got to
go to the Santa Cruz, which is a nice place, and we got to eat something
some tasty
that was
food.
very good. What did we eat?
We had a burger at some place that
that's right. Right.
Yeah.
With Todd. That's right.
Yeah, and then in the morning we had some tacos, some breakfast tacos.
Oh, that's right. Tessa
and so we're basically deciding what's happening, and Linus has decided, he's going to drive and get this pickup truck, and he's going to see it through. He's going to follow me the rest of the way, and I will be forever grateful. Although it probably would have saved a lot of aggravation and trouble and turmoil if he just said, you know what, this is not a good idea.
This is not a good idea. But despite the best efforts of everyone around you and anyone you've spoken with, you continue on. We're only at day 3. It seems as though we've been at this for 2 weeks already, but in fact, this is only day 3. So day 3, breakfast tacos, and you embark farther north from Santa Cruz. So what adventure does day 3 bring?
Well, we didn't, again, we had no idea where we were going to try to end up. And I think trying to have places that you intend to end up on trips like this is a mistake. So
it's helpful to have a list of options, but, there's so many things that can go wrong, or so many interesting things that you could stop and see, that inevitably you're going to run behind schedule, or unexpected things can happen. And so
the big thing to get through on day 3 was San Francisco. All the traffic, the lane changes, the highway. So we took Highway 1 all the way up, Half Moon Bay, Pacifica, over Highway 35, and we came down onto 280, and we're heading up 19th Avenue, and there's just cars everywhere, stop signs everywhere, and this is not the first thing that had fallen off of Ike's motorcycle, but it was the first thing we noticed, including, to be fair, Ike himself. Yes, that's true. We did notice that
everything falls off the motorcycle at one point or another.
I'm
actually really nervous about driving through San Francisco because, the motorcycle controls don't lend themselves well to like putting your feet down or
extreme hill.
Hills. So there's some hills there and some stoplights on hills, and there's not really a good way to hold yourself on the hill. You can kind of switch feet from the clutch to the brake and put alternate feet down and these sorts of things, but it's not as convenient and easy as a modern motorcycle for sure. So I'm a little nervous about getting through San Francisco, and also not being run over by somebody. So things are going along great. I'm navigating traffic. The motorcycle's behaving itself. And that's when it decides to reject all of its components all over the road. At some point, I heard like what sounded like maybe a piece of angle iron hitting the road. And I was like, maybe I just ran over a grate or something like that. And that'll come in later. But I hit a bump at one point driving through town, and like the whole front of the headlight, the lens and the ring and all that stuff falls off onto the ground. And I do notice this, and I'm like, shit, and because the parts for this thing are so expensive, I can't really just like leave it. And so I pull off on the side of the road, and I like go back, and there's traffic, there's like a million cars, and Linus is trying to find a spot to pull over, and it's just like, it's horrible. And it's like on a hill, and there's oil leaking out of them. It's really bad. So I run back, and fortunately the ring that holds the lens in place, or supposed to hold the lens in place, is sitting in the middle of the road, and it's not being run over. The car tires are going on either side of it. And so I wait for a break, and I pick that up. The lens, unfortunately, is broken, and pieces of it are under cars. And I'm sure those went on to like ruin someone else's day by puncturing their tires or something. It's just like a whole avalanche of shit that I've unleashed on the world with buying this motorcycle. So, we pick those up, we put them in the saddlebags, we get going, and we're driving. We managed to make it over the Golden Gate Bridge. And that's kind of like the end of San Francisco for the most part. And we stopped to take a few photos, and we're like, whew, that was the worst of it. It's all over. It's all downhill from here, like
marking maybe the diamond centennial time you guys have said that on this trip.
Yeah. So that's, and we meet a friend calls us and is like, I want to meet you guys for lunch. And we're like, this is great. We need a break from all this stress and of driving through town and stuff falling off and what have you. So we meet him. He's an epidemiologist. He comes over from UCSC and meets us for lunch. And so
Berkeley, UC Berkeley.
Yeah, I'm sorry, UC Berkeley, and we have a nice lunch with him. And so that was kind of a really good break in the day. And then what we decided to go on to our other friend John's.
Right. So we were trying to decide where to cut across back to Highway 1 because we're on 101 at this point.
You're right. Yeah.
And we could do several things. I think we could go a little further north to the town name is escaping me right now, and then cut across over to 1. Or we happen to be having lunch on Sir Francis Drake Boulevard, I think, which goes all the way to the coast. So we decided to just do that. And we get out to the coast. We go through some of those small towns, and we're coming up, and we're getting towards the Bodega area, Bodega Bay. And we recall, I think we pulled over somewhere to take some pictures, and we recall that our friend John Braben, who here is the one Land Rover related subject in this podcast. John Braben, who is a wonderful Land Rover enthusiast and a good friend, lives in the town of Bodega, and he has 400 acres there. And so I call him, and sure enough, he can accommodate us. So that is where we decided to head for, I think, that day. I don't remember that there was much else happened between lunch and getting there.
We stopped and met the world record or world champion skateboard for like 1997, World Skateboard Championship of 1997, Richie De La Rosa, who was like riding his 30-year-old antique Segway by and doing tricks on it.
That's true. That's true.
And he's like, holy shit, that's a badass motorcycle, man. And he is wearing a shirt with a photograph of my motorcycle on it.
Yeah, exactly.
And he's like, you ever heard of me? I'm the world skateboard champion, and I'm good friends with Steve Wozniak. And he just like had all these crazy stories, and he was super fun to talk to. And he was
guy is better at riding the Segway than we are at walking.
Oh yeah, which doesn't say a whole lot, to be honest.
Yeah, that's true. I was going to say
doesn't say a whole lot, but
he was really good.
He was super funny, and he's like, you know what? I was in one of the early viral videos. He was like, I rode this Segway backwards down some steps at Steve Wozniak's house, and then I edited it so it looked like I was going up the steps. You wouldn't believe how many people called me and was like, how the fuck do you do that? I keep crashing.
Yeah, he was a talented guy.
He was pretty funny.
And that was, we met him in the town of Bodega at the little market there. And I think that was right when we turned off to go to John's place.
Yep.
So,
and we went to John's place?
Yeah, we went to John's place, and we had, what did we have for dinner? We got some sandwiches or something there at the little market where we met Richie. And we get to John's place, and he's got like what do they call it? Hip camp, I think.
Yeah, he's got this thing where he like rits out camp spots, and he's like, you guys can stay in the woods, and take a spot, and no big deal. He raises. He's an interesting guy. He raises Muscovy ducks, maybe, and Anatolian sheepdogs, and some sort of New Zealand variety of goat. And he's from New Zealand, and he's a vision researcher, and he literally cures blind people. He's like,
it's true,
the coolest guy ever. And
he has a Land Rover, and
soon to be two. And he has the most wonderful way of speaking. If you've ever seen a Monty Python film, he speaks like a lot of the people in that show, kind of with a lilting. It's not super high pitched, but it's like a, ooh, so wonderful to see you, Ike and Linus. You're not on your Land Rover.
Like a Bullwinkle villain?
Kind of, yeah. And you think he's doing a voice until you realize that that's genuinely how he talks, and it's wonderful. It's so great.
He's a really pleasant person to be around. Always a pleasure to see him at Mendo's and other events that we've gone to. That was only the second time I've been to his property, but it's very picturesque, full of redwood trees, full of berries and vines and, massive thickets of poison oak and stickers.
Capital effort, you fellows.
True. He's got like a river, a creek that runs between the two campsites where we were staying and the other 3 campsites he has and his house. And so we're sitting down there and we hear this zooming and splashing, and suddenly, what did he have? An LR3?
Some sort of newer Land Rover. Yeah.
Suddenly we hear this splashing and zooming, and this LR3 comes bounding up out of the sticker vines up this sand hill and racing down to our campsite, and he hops out. It was very, very much fun to have him there. And so, that was our 3rd night now?
That's day 3. So now day 4. You wake up, you're in David's place.
So again, we spent a lot of time that night working on the motorcycle. We had the lantern out. We were tightening the chain. We were trying to take off the side cover for some reason, and we couldn't.
Yeah, because all of the fucking screws were like rusted
Totally
in there.
rusted
It was
in
like
there.
the side cover was not the original. It was like off of the Titanic. And so it had been at the bottom of the ocean for 80 fucking years.
What were we were up very late working on that thing in lantern lights.
Oh, because we realized that sound, the angle iron sound that I thought was riding over a grate, was actually the rear stand falling off the motorcycle, and which makes it very difficult to adjust the chain. Fortunately, Linus had accidentally left some jack stands in
the back of the pickup truck,
and so we put those under the crash bars, and we had like a tarp laid out and all these tools, and we get it all we get the rear chain adjusted, and we get things like kind of where we want them, and we have dinner and we play cards, and like everything's just going great. Everything's going great. And we have we set up our camp, and we just have a nice little sleep, and we wake up in the morning completely fresh as a daisy, totally rested. Everything's going wonderful. And you know what? I start the motorcycle in the morning, and it starts like almost the first kick, maybe the second kick. And I warm it up, and I'm like, wow, this is going to be a great day. We
get all packed up.
We get all packed up. I get all my motorcycle gear on, put my helmet on, put my gloves on, jacket, motorcycle pants. And this is after breakfast. I've already warmed up the motorcycle. I'm expecting a smooth departure. And I go to kick the motorcycle, and I kick the goddamn transmission in half. It fucking breaks in half and dumps out all the oil all over the ground. And I'm sitting there, and I'm just like, fuck, I just ruined this motorcycle again. I've broken it in half, and I'm like, that's it. I'm done. There's no way we're finding a pre-war Harley Davidson kickstart transmission cover in the middle of the goddamn woods in California. That's not happening. It's not happening. And so, we've pretty much come to the conclusion that the trip is over. We've decided that we need a trailer. We're going to trailer this thing away. But Linus is calling trailer rental places, and to try and find a trailer.
We had to go to town to get cell service.
Yeah, we didn't really have good cell service, and we were calling these trailer rental places, and they were like, "What do you want to tow?" And I was like, do you have a fucking trailer or not? It doesn't matter.
What kind of car do you have?
What kind of car do you have? What's your birth date? What's your family's maiden name? Where are you from? Asking me all these questions. Do you want to be part of the survey?
just like, yeah. Do you have a motorcycle trailer?
Like,
oh, no, we don't have a motorcycle trailer.
Or do you have any
a regular trailer?
Any trailers? No, we don't have any trailers at all. So during this process, Linus is calling around, and I'm calling motorcycle people. Some of the people that told me this was a bad idea to begin with. And they...
So remember when you told me this was a bad idea?
Yeah, I did it anyway, and this bad thing happened. And so can you help us out of this bad situation that we've created for ourselves? So... one person calls another person, and we've got into the motorcycle grapevine somehow. We're not we're not in this world or of this world. We're kind of into Land Rovers and not really motorcycles. And so, one dude calls another dude, and that dude, sends up a road flare, and that signal, the beacons of Gondor were lit. And,
yes.
and we end up finding this guy who is a chopper builder in San Francisco.
Oakland.
I'm sorry. Yeah, Oakland, which is adjacent to San Francisco.
Yes, it's San Francisco adjacent. Yeah.
Yes, and his name is Max Scheif. I think I'm pronouncing that right. And he's a super, super knowledgeable motorcycle guy and knows all about antique motorcycles. He asked me some questions about what's happened and what's wrong and some pictures of what has happened. And I send him those, and he's like, I have the part you need, and I will ride it out to the middle of the forest where your motorcycle is broken down and,
help you put it on.
And I'm like, oh, this is great. So I agree to pay him, basically whatever it takes to have him do this.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, okay, I'm going to jump on my chopper and ride out there. And so we wait. And I'm like, this guy's riding, an hour or 2 hours through San Francisco traffic to the middle of the forest to help us with this. I was like, Linus, we need to get some beer and sandwiches for this guy when he shows up.
Yes.
Which would turn out to be a great idea because we send him a pin, right? Because there's not really an address where we are. We're just in the middle of the woods. And so he gets there. We hear this chopper like about half an hour after he said he would be there. We hear this burbling through the woods. The Jabberwocky is knocking down trees and burbling through the woods. And gyring and all of that stuff that Jabberwockies do. And he shows up, and I open the gate for him to John's property, and he pulls in, and he's like, what the fuck is the matter with you guys? And I was like, do you want a list? There's a lot. But he was super mad because, the pin was somewhat vague, and he had gone to a neighboring property, and somebody yelled at him, and he was mad, and
right. I had no idea how to put a pin where we were, so I chose a pin that was near, an address nearby, but John Braben had texted us instructions, right? And I had forwarded those instructions to him as well. And my intention had been for the pin to be a guide to the general area and then the written instructions to be the final. But he just went to where the pin was and didn't read the instructions. So he didn't know to go 2.6 miles past where Johnson's silo used to be and turn at the cow. And then, he didn't know all of that stuff. So he
and
got
if the cow
there,
had moved over the course
exactly,
of the day,
it would have been. Right. So he got there in a great huff, which I understand completely.
It was totally understandable. And I was like, dude, I know you're mad, but you found the place and we have a sandwich and a beer for you.
We got some sandwiches.
And he was like, all right, I'll look at it.
And by that he meant the sandwich.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we pulled out. We had 3 sandwiches.
What kind of sandwich? And I was like, I got 3 just because we didn't know what kind of person you were. And so that chilled him out, and he was super helpful and helped us fix everything. We had a great time chatting with him and fixing the bike, and he showed us a lot of things that we didn't know. Which is mostly everything.
He had expected us to be very different from what we were.
I think most people do.
He thought that this was like some kind of stupid chopper bike that somebody had built, and it turned out to be like an incredible original motorcycle. And he said, I've had a lot of motorcycles, and I have a lot of motorcycles, but I want this one.
And that actually made me feel a lot better about the whole thing.
And that's
when he stabbed you both. That's where
another thing that he had said was how did it go? He said, I could have gone home by now, but this is actually a lot of fun.
No, that's good.
He also said I don't do cocaine very often.
And started eyeing the bag of talc.
That's true. We gave him some talc
menacing way.
But he ended up enjoying himself, laughing at our suffering, and having a generally good time. And he did save the day. He went through so much trouble that he disassembled a transmission at his house and test fitted the cover that he brought to make sure that it was the right one.
Like bored out the holes to make sure
he
that
cleaned
it would
out the
fit
holes so
perfectly.
that it would go on, and he put it on for us and everything. It was absolutely, you couldn't have found a more useful, helpful person than he
was the
at
best. He
time.
really saved our ass, and the trip couldn't have continued, for better or for worse, without his assistance. And if you get an opportunity, follow him on Instagram. 4Q69, I believe, is his motorcycle shop, and he does really amazing work and is a super nice dude.
Yeah.
So this isn't the end of the story yet, which is still amazing to
This
me.
is like day 3.
It's the most insurmountable trip back to Eugene, Oregon anyone has ever conceived of, and yet you're still going. So, new transmission cover.
We also left out the giraffes and the buffaloes and the zebras and
true.
the wildebeest and all that stuff.
True.
We totally
That's a
forgot about
Patreon exclusive.
that. Yeah.
And the halflingers and the forward control.
Oh yeah. We left out so many things that happened and interesting people, but really that was the tipping point in the trip. We feel like we had fixed everything that had possibly gone wrong, and the things that would have gone wrong had fallen off at this point. So there was nothing really left for us to do other than ride the rest of the way. And so that's what we did. We hauled ass to Point Arena. I think from Bodega Bay, we really hauled ass. I guess that was the next thing. We went to Point Arena, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we stopped for some breakfast burritos somewhere.
Yeah.
Was that the next day? It's all blending
It's
together.
all blending together. All the horror is trauma.
So
post-traumatic stress.
you and Jenna had gone on a trip somewhere previously and pinned an interesting camping spot that you'd found.
Yeah, there's almost no place to camp around here with a truck and trailer, especially like guerrilla style. And by guerrilla style, I mean a place where you're maybe not supposed to camp, but it's not strictly forbidden,
Right.
Like
It's a gray area.
Yeah, you have some plausible deniability if somebody hassles you. But those are some of my favorite camp spots. It's fine to pay $40 and camp in a normal spot, and I don't mind doing that at all. But occasionally, it's fine to find these out of the way gems. And on a previous trip, Jenna and I found this really amazing spot which overlooks the ocean, and there's like eagles flying around and windswept trees, and it's kind of a forgotten part or spur of Highway 101 that I don't really know its history, but it kind of goes along this cliff or outcropping for about 1.5 miles. And then there's like hiking trails and walking trails that go down to the coast, and there's, seals barking, and it's a wonderful place, and it's gated off with some combination locks. And we're like, wouldn't it be nice if we could camp up there instead of just walking up there and camping here, where there all this like refuse and toilet paper from people stopping and making roadside deposits.
So I had said, well, at my work where we have a combination gate, oftentimes I'll come in the morning, and whoever had locked the gate the day before will have just moved one number up or down, or 2 numbers up or down. And I said, well, let's just try, flipping the last number up 1 and then down 1 and the first number, and you just try. Ike is a very persistent person, and he continued trying well beyond the amount of the 30 seconds I would have spent. I think he spent 5 whole minutes screwing with that thing. Easily. But he had an epiphany.
Easily. I easily spent that much time, noodling around on this and like trying to change the numbers, and it got further and further away from something that was logical. And then it struck me, there's 2 combination locks on this gate. Maybe the person that tried to open this last tried the other one first and changed it to the combination, and then realized it wasn't the right lock, and then opened the second lock with that combination without turning the numbers. And sure enough, the first lock had the combination on it. And it opened, and as it opened, Linus's eyes got huge, and he was like, "No fucking way! You opened that combination lock." And so we pulled into this amazing overlook. This beautiful tree overlook. All this stuff the sun is setting. We've locked the gate behind us, so no one can follow us in here
unless they figure out that combination trick.
Yeah, it's totally,
nobody's going to do that.
It's our totally own little private wonderland of camping, and we set it up. We put our table out and our chairs, and we had bought a painting at an antique store, and we hung it in a tree, and we had lamps, and we had just this whole living room set up, and we had dinner, and it was amazing.
And it was really neat because there's very few places that you can camp like this. We could not see a single light on the land anywhere. Mm-hmm. There was a fishing boat out in the water that had a light, but there was no light anywhere on land that we could see. And it was really a special spot, and I wish we could go back there.
The painting is still there.
We did get a little bit. I got very damp. I had to throw my camp into my truck and sleep in the truck just from the coastal fog. It was. I had a
coastal fog,
a rain fly from my tent over me, and somehow my sleeping bag got full of pee. I don't know what happened.
There was no one around. I swear to God. No. You'll have that, coastal fog and all. And so you wake up in an idyllic setting. Day 5. Now in the glide slope, you're on the way home. At this point,
we're on the way home. We're feeling good, and for the most part, we're hauling ass. But every once in a while, the motorcycle acts up or won't start, or I have to kick it 100 times, or something. So, but generally, it's cruising along.
Is this when you suddenly pulled over to the side of the highway and pointed at your handlebars?
Gosh, I don't remember. It might have been on this day, but yeah.
I think it was this day.
We had been filming this entire journey with 2 GoPro cameras.
Right.
And, periodically we would move them from the Model T to the motorcycle, or in some cases, Linus would be holding them and filming. And
then I had one in the pickup truck.
Yeah.
Because I had taken it off the Model T.
And so I realize about, I'm going to say 5 miles after it happened.
I think it was like 10.
Okay, 10 miles after it happened, that yet another thing has fallen off the motorcycle. And unfortunately, it is one of the GoPros.
Oh, no.
And I'm like horrified that we've lost all of this footage recording this horrible debacle.
So by chance, I had been following Ike. Ike was in the left lane, and I was in the right-hand lane, and we were going across a bridge. And something came out from underneath Ike's tire and rolled across in front of me and bounced into the 6-inch wide space between the edge of the bridge and the white line. Yeah. And at the time, I had no idea what it was. Because I didn't see it come off the motorcycle. I thought he just kicked it up. But it did cross my mind that it was his GoPro. But there was literally nowhere to stop on the bridge. It was a long bridge. So I just kept going. And, I said, if that had been his GoPro, he would have pulled over by now. He would have noticed. And we just kept going and going and going and going and going and going. And suddenly he pulled over.
And I noticed it. I noticed it, and I was like, fuck, it's probably gone forever. And Linus is like, oh, I know exactly where that is.
Oh, did you want that? Oh.
So I turned around, and Ike promised me $1,000 if I could retrieve it. And so I went back and I parked. I went back past the bridge, came back. I parked on the north side of the bridge. And then I got out my GoPro and made a video of me going and retrieving this one off the side of the highway. And it was there. The lens had come off, I think, but it was totally hadn't been run over. So we saved the GoPro.
Saved the GoPro.
Was the footage usable.
Oh yeah,
Ike's got the footage.
I have the footage.
It's like the Blair Witch Project. How much of the crash did it record?
0.
None, because I was in front of him at the time.
So that wasn't on that footage, but
and so
we'll get to that. We'll get to the footage and the content later a little bit.
I think what was that day we realized that you didn't have any lights.
Yeah, the generator stopped working, and it was only putting out 1.8
volts.
Which on a 6-volt system is enough to run the ignition, but nothing else.
Oh.
And
that's something we were screwing around with that night at John Braben's house, trying to fix the generator.
We decided that we were only going to drive.
It was enough to run the motorcycle.
Yeah, but it also made it really hard to start because it
made it really hard to start
at full voltage. Yeah. So that was great.
So we were kind of in a pickle to find a place to camp that night because it was getting darker and darker and we had no lights. Oh heck, that's when we got stuck in traffic for 4 hours.
Wasn't that the next day? Well, yeah, it probably was that day because that was that day.
It was just south of Crescent City. So they were doing like a bridge retrofit, or there had been a slide, and they were doing a bridge retrofit. And so we were trying to get to the bridge retrofit so that we could get through. They closed it for 4-hour periods, and it was open for 3-hour periods. It was open from 12 till 3, and then it was closed from 3 to 7. So we were trying to get there before they closed the road for 4 hours. And
we're hauling ass. We're skipping all these
cool places. That's when the GoPro fell off.
Yeah.
And, we got delayed, and then it wouldn't start at the gas station, and we got delayed. So we finally get to the bridge retrofit, and we got through it. It was like 3:01, and we got through it, only to discover that there was another closure right after it that we didn't make it in time to get through.
And they're like, there's like 2 cars in front of us, and they're like,
and they let those through.
And they're like, not you guys.
Not you guys. We were the last people to get there.
And they're like, you have to stay here for 4 hours.
4
Actually,
hours.
You have to go back to town.
Yeah.
And it was horrible. And so we sat there and I think we played cards for 4 hours.
Right. We waited in line for 4 hours and played cards, and it got darker and darker. And then we finally got through to Crescent City. And what did we like? We got some burritos.
There's like no place to stop in Crescent City. And so, yeah. And I'm like, I'm going to try to make it to Jedediah Smith.
And I went back to get the burritos.
And Linus went back to get burritos. And so I'm on my way north, down 199 a little ways to try and find a camp spot before it gets completely dark and I can't ride the motorcycle because it has no lights.
Mm-hmm.
And so
because the light fell off in San Francisco.
Yeah, because the light fell off and the generator stopped working.
And even if it was on the motorcycle, there would be no power.
It would be very, very limited.
Right.
So I get to this campsite, Jedediah Smith, which is beautiful. It's on the Smith River Valley. There's redwood trees. It's gorgeous, super beautiful place. And this time we are not so lucky. There is not some lady who has overbought campsites, and there is nothing available. There's nothing available in the entire place. It's a big, big place,
And it's dark.
And totally it's completely dark. So we can't proceed. We can't go to another place. And so we're like, fuck it. We'll just, there's a huge log. Redwood logs are massive for those of you that don't live in the United States. They're, easily 6 feet in diameter. And there is one in front of a parking space. And you know what? I said, you know what, Linus? I'm going to camp on the other side of the log. No one will ever know.
So I parked in the parking space, and we pushed the motorcycle in front of the truck, and we both slept in the bushes. And nobody even looked. Nobody came by. It was this weird sort of side loop off of a side loop, and there was a pullout, and we went in it. Nobody even noticed.
It was fine.
It was perfect.
It was super great. And so and Linus is at this point sweating it a little bit because his time on the trip is quickly coming to a close because he has to go back.
Right. He has a hard return date to Santa Cruz where you just were.
I had to go to a memorial, which was at 10:30 in the morning on Saturday, and it's Thursday night.
Yeah, so this is not looking good, and we have basically the longest day we've ridden so far is 250 miles, something
Right.
like that, and so we have 350 miles left, something in that order, and so we're faced with the longest day and
no time to get there.
no time to get there.
No time to get there.
But fortunately, things were going great. The motorcycle decides to behave itself. We're cruising along 60, 70 miles an hour. Linus is in his Toyota pickup, so no issues there. And, we have this lighter GoPro, which I decided to exchange for the heavier one that is broken off the handlebar. The motorcycle vibrates so much that the first GoPro, which is a full-size one, has broken off and fallen into the highway. And we get, I'm going to say, we get just past Grants Pass, I think, is where this happened. And I filmed all this cool footage where I'm weaving through the Smith River Valley.
Right.
And
this is the GoPro that I had on my Model T. So it had all the footage I took of Ike riding, and it had all the footage of me rescuing the other GoPro, and it had most of the footage of the Model T. There was not, because I had it and I was videoing my own car because that's what one does. And, I would hold it out the window and follow Ike around turns on the Highway 1 as he would, and going through bridges, under tunnels and over bridges, Bixby Bridge. And so I could put it on his motorcycle so he could keep using it. And
I thought, okay, this mount is designed for mounting to the handlebar of a motorcycle, and dirt bikers use them, and surely this can handle driving down the street, but not on this hateful machine that vibrates like a cheap massage bed in a dirty hotel. So this thing manages to, break free as well. It's broken. The mount actually breaks. The GoPro, the smaller one, tumbles down the highway. And this time I notice it and I'm like, shit. And I pull over almost immediately, but it still takes about a quarter mile for the brakes to bring this thing to a halt. And
it's like a train.
I pull over,
slowing a freight train,
and I'm wearing all my gear, and it's hot. We're out of the coast, and it's burning up. The asphalt's hot, everything's hot. I'm wearing all my gear, and I hoof it up the road to try and rescue this thing from the highway. And I get up there, and it's in the middle of the left-hand lane, and I'm like, oh, perfect. It's not in the path of any tires. It's gonna survive. It's a little tweaked, I can see, but it looks intact. It's gonna be fine. I just need to wait for traffic to pass. And right then, a car moves just ever so slightly within the lane and kicks it up like 6 feet in the air, and it lands in the right-hand lane. And I'm like, oh, the case is a little tweaked. The camera's probably screwed, but I'll probably be able to get the footage off of it, And about 10 seconds after that, I had that thought, a semi-truck comes along and sucks it up under the thing, and it goes under the rear tires, under both sets of rear tires, and disintegrates into 400 million tiny, tiny, tiny little parts, and I'm showered with them. And I literally watch all this footage that we've gone through, all this horror show to get just be completely destroyed. And I'm like, oh no. And I try to look on the highway for the little micro SD card, which is somewhere within a 200-yard range in 5 different pieces.
It was heartbreaking.
It's spread out all over the highway. I picked up as many pieces as I could, and the largest one would probably go through a salt shaker. It was that horrible how bad it was.
Totally trashed.
It was totally trash. And so that was pretty devastating. And that was the last thing to fall off that motorcycle, I believe.
So.
Yeah. Yeah. And the rest of the trip was pretty straightforward. The last 80 miles, 90 miles from Grants Pass to, it's a little bit more, I guess. Last 100 miles from Grants Pass to Eugene was pretty smooth sailing, but that was
2.5 hours in a car or something like that.
Yeah, I was just crushed the whole way. I was like, oh man.
Yeah, but no more incidents. We made it back.
You managed to make it 80 miles without anything breaking down or falling off.
Incredibly.
Which was surprising.
Yeah, that is. That's a new personal best. Well
but
done.
that's not where the story ends with the motorcycle, because after a week, I think I decided I was going to ride the motorcycle to lunch.
Mm-hmm.
And I started it up and I rode it to lunch, and it starts making this banshee noise out of the front wheel bearing. Ree, 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 ree. And so, of course, I'm like, oh, man, I better take that apart, because a front wheel bearing failure is super serious on a motorcycle. It
Yep.
can lock up and throw you, you could die really easily.
Mm-hmm.
And so I took it all apart, and there was no grease in the front wheel bearings at
It was
all.
all rust powder.
It was just
I was going to say
powdered
the
metal.
best. Yeah, it looks like hot chocolate mix.
It's
Sort of what it looked
terrible.
like. Just terrifying.
And I'm like, oh, I cheated death yet again. How long was it like that? Well, probably the whole way,
Probably
And we
the
did
whole
stop
way.
and put grease in it.
We
but
did.
It was so empty that it made no difference.
Yeah, we without taking it apart, you wouldn't have known this was a problem. And I had been told that this motorcycle had been mechanically gone through, blah, blah, blah. And this is something that you would assume is part of that process, right? Putting grease in the bearings. But, the front hub, you think, oh, I'm going to add grease to that, and that's going to force the existing grease into the bearings. So
Right.
we added some, but there was nothing to force into the bearings, and so it ran completely dry. So
The whole way home, it was completely dry.
yeah, it could have failed at any time along the coast. I could have been tossed down a 400-foot cliff into the ocean at any minute. At any minute.
The 9th or 10th way you could have died on that motorcycle.
Yeah,
It's true.
yeah,
So when did we get back? Like at 11 o'clock in the morning?
yeah, something like that.
And so I followed you back to your shop. I threw your shit on the ground and immediately left.
And then drove 9 hours back home to this memorial service.
Yeah, I got. I that's exactly what happened. I went home, I took a shower, and I flippin' left. And I went all the way back down to San Jose, so I could go to that memorial the next morning.
The whole time he was driving, I was like, sucks to be that guy.
But I made it, and I went to the memorial, and let's see, I had borrowed your trailer
Yeah.
behind my Tacoma, and I went back to Santa Cruz, and I collected the Model T, and I brought the Model T to my friend Alan's house in Fort Jones, California, where he has a nice workshop for antique cars, and I'm going to go down there in the next couple of days or weeks and pull it apart and figure out what's actually wrong with it, and hope it is not the roof overhead valve head, because that's impossible to find, and hope it's just a head gasket. But both of us have continued repercussions from this trip that we will have to resolve.
I will for years to come.
I will never be the
Years to
same.
come.
I woke up the next day and my ribs were hurting really bad, and I was like, "Oh, I must have slept on those funny." Nope. I
It was from
apparently
the crash.
apparently from the crash, I broke a rib, and it was excruciating, and I didn't realize it until I wasn't on the motorcycle.
Well, it's nice to know that the ride is so smooth you don't notice a broken rib.
It's so
Yeah.
unpleasant you don't notice a broken rib.
It's just it lulls you into just like
It
a
takes
sense
your mind
like
off of it.
like a catatonic sort of state that you're riding in. Well, that's great. Well, what are your long-term takeaways from this? Would you do it again if you had to? Was it that character building of an experience that looking in hindsight it was really, I mean, from my standpoint, we got a whole special edition podcast out of it, so it feels great for me.
My personal intention is to do more of this, but longer,
right, yeah.
longer trips. I want to drive my old car, maybe to Colorado, maybe to like Yellowstone. I want to drive an antique car across the country on the Lincoln Highway. That had been my intention to do later this year, but I don't think it's going to happen at this point.
And is that a
but I'd like to do
masochistic
more.
thing? Is it a tantric thing? Like, where is the kink that is causing you?
I don't know. It's There isn't a reason, Stephen. There is no reason to do such a thing at all. One cannot use logic to come up with an answer to that question. It's just an emotional thing that it sounds like it would be fun to do in the traditional way. Why have an antique motorcycle if you can't use it as a motorcycle? Why
That's
have an
exactly
antique
right.
car if you can't use it as a car? It's a car. It's supposed to be used. I would like to use it. I would like to do something fun with it. Just the same as you might take your family to Yellowstone in your car because you want to see Yellowstone. I would like to take my antique car to Yellowstone just to see Yellowstone. But I think the adventure would be greater if I used something stupid like a 1921 Studebaker.
For myself, I not only never want to ride a motorcycle again, I don't want to see Linus ever again either.
And on that, we've come full circle.
The truth has been told.
And there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. What an incredible way to spend 6 days and God knows how many parts strewn across the north or the western coast of the United States. You guys are braver than most and
Just dumber.
Or dumber than most, but whatever. It's certainly something. And Linus, I agree with you 100%. If you're going to have something like that, you should use it. You should enjoy it. It makes you appreciate the things we have in modern life, and I think appreciate even more the things that came from
It's
years
true.
before.
I mean, we wouldn't have met several interesting people. We wouldn't have seen several interesting places. We wouldn't have maybe we would have stayed at John Braben's house. I feel like in a modern car, we would have zoomed past it long before we got there on the motorcycle and not even thought of it. And, it's just the timing of it. It's slower. You see different things. You experience different things. I think everybody should not do this, but some people should. And you know who you are already. So I hope
Absolutely.
you do it.
Well, on that, Ike, I'm glad you didn't die. Linus, we're going to get updates on your car and how things are going back together. And we're going to work on getting an exorcism scheduled for Ike's motorcycle here in the very near future. Well, dear audience, we hope you enjoyed the summer breakdown as Ike and I get to take the next week off. You are listening to this. Well, who knows, perhaps riding a vintage motorcycle, Velma and Louise style, into a canyon somewhere. You'll have to stay tuned to find out, but hopefully everybody has enjoyed their summer. We certainly have enjoyed ours, and this marks the close of the first season of the Underpowered Hour. And thank you all for listening. We have all kinds of fun stuff coming up in our next season of episodes. Linus, I hope you will come on again and actually talk about Land Rovers. Land Rover
definitely. We have
podcast.
Lots of talking to do about Land Rovers.
Ike, I hope everything that was broken, both internally and externally, and mentally, physically, spiritually, all mends well, and you're back in fighting form soon. And as always, there is video and fully extended versions of this podcast to your listeners on our Patreon. So if you were so inclined to head over there and check that out, you are welcome to do so if you want to kill an entire day listening to the story of the transit from south to north. And at that, thank you guys again.
Thank you, Stephen.
And we'll see you out on the trail.
Thanks, Stephen. Looking forward to it.